Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving straight into something that is frankly mind-boggling, the terrifying domino effect of human interference in delicate ecosystems. As we all know, actions have consequences, but sometimes those consequences multiply into something so chaotic and completely unrecognizable that you just have to step back in awe. We're going to unpack the history and the catastrophic ecological impacts of 4 specific invasive species, and look at how what started as incredibly minor human interventions triggered completely unstoppable chain reactions.
You see, today's explainer is really going to show you the domino effect in action. We'll look at how well-intentioned or honestly just careless human actions spiral into multi-billion-dollar ecological disasters that completely outmatch our modern technology. We are talking about situations where humans literally created the problem, threw absolutely everything they had at fixing it, and still lost. So let's jump right into our first example and see how this builds.
Section 1. Australia's Rabbit Calamity.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this really highlights the sheer hubris we're dealing with. We're going to look at how a 19th century desire for a simple British hunting sport went horribly, horizontally wrong. Back in 1859, this British settler named Thomas Austin was living on a massive estate in Victoria, Australia, and he was feeling a bit homesick. He missed the traditional gentleman's sports of his homeland, so he orders exactly 24 rabbits from 5 different species and releases them into the wild. He literally thought, what harm could a few rabbits do, and just let them breed for a bit so he could hunt them later.
Well, to answer Thomas Austin's question, about $200 million worth of harm every single year. That is the absolutely staggering annual cost Australia pays today just to handle the offspring of those initial 24 rabbits. It is a massive financial drain, and it's a stunning whiplash contrast. How on earth did we get from 24 little animals to a multi-million-dollar yearly catastrophe? It was like a ticking clock right from the start. Just 5 years after Austin released them, neighboring farmers were already complaining. By 1865, they were killing 14,000 rabbits on Austin's estate alone. Fast forward to 1870, and hundreds of thousands are running wild, causing severe soil erosion and pushing local plants and animals toward extinction. Austin conveniently died in 1871, completely dodging the blame for his actions. By the early 1900s, the government is desperately constructing 3 massive fences just to stop them from spreading westward. But you know, rabbits can dig, so the fences ended up being a colossal waste of money and manpower.
At this point, humans start fighting back with just absolute chaos. I mean, we're talking burning burrows, throwing bombs into holes, spreading poisonous carrots. They even resorted to dropping poison from the sky. In 1887, they offered a massive 25,000-pound bounty for a real solution, but nobody could claim it. Finally, in the 1950s and 90s, they introduced viruses like myxomatosis and RHDV. And sure, those viruses wiped out like 99% of the rabbits, but here is the terrifying reality of biology. That surviving 1% simply developed immunity and bounced right back. Today, there are around 300 million rabbits in Australia. It's a never-ending war started by one homesick guy.
Moving on to Section 2, Florida's Giant Python Invasion.
Now, let's transition to a totally different kind of disaster. The pattern of innocent introduction causing massive harm continues, but this time we're swapping out those furry herbivores for 19-foot muscle noodles from Southeast Asia, the Burmese python. And this brilliantly illustrates how natural disasters can completely mask an ecological ticking time bomb. This whole thing happened in steps. First, people in Florida were buying these exotic snakes as pets, realizing they actually grow to 19 feet and then just dumping them in the woods. Then, step 2. Hurricane Andrew hits in 1992. Total devastation. It caused $28 billion in damage, destroyed 63,000 houses, and tragically took 65 lives. Amidst all that chaos, a destroyed pet warehouse released about 100 pythons into the Everglades. With the state in full emergency recovery mode, literally nobody had the resources to worry about a few snakes, which leads to step 3. Those surviving pythons slithered into a warm, wet paradise that was basically a predator-free, all-you-can-eat buffet.
And the terrifying logic here really just comes down to survival rates. In their native Southeast Asia, the survival rate for these pythons was below 5%, but in the Florida Everglades, it shoots up to over 20%. Now, when you consider that a single female python lays anywhere from 50 to 100 eggs at a time and faces absolutely 0 natural predators, that survival rate means explosive growth. The population effortlessly crossed 50,000 in just 9 years.
Today, that number sits right around 300,000. That is 300,000 giant apex predators loose in Florida, and they are eating everything. Local species in the Everglades are literally on the verge of extinction because of this. These snakes are even eating native crocodiles. We're trying to fight back with modern technology, attaching GPS devices to females to locate nests, hosting these huge public hunting challenges, and yeah, in 2024 alone, hunters caught around 20,000 pythons. But against a population of 300,000 that breeds this incredibly fast, the numbers are still going up. Oddly enough, they're actually decreasing in their native homelands, while absolutely thriving as invaders here in the US.
Let's head into Section 3, the billion-dollar starling swarm.
All right, shifting our focus to North America in the late 1800s. Our next disaster was fueled by the American Acclimatization Society, some very flawed pest control logic, and a deeply misguided love for Shakespeare. A man named Eugene Schiff was part of a New York group that imported European birds. Legend actually says he wanted to introduce every single bird mentioned in Shakespeare's plays to Central Park, though frankly, using them for pest control was probably the real motive. He released skylarks, nightingales, song thrushes, and almost all of them died off from the cold or starvation. But one species survived, the European starling. From an initial import of just around 100 birds, they adapted, they thrived, and they started spreading. By 1930, they were a serious ecological problem, and by the 1950s, they had spread all the way up to Canada.
So why did they spread so insanely well? Simply put, because starlings are absolute bullies. Landing in a new environment with no natural predators, they jump straight to the absolute top of the bully chain. They will literally throw native birds right out of their tree holes. They steal nesting areas, they kill native chicks, and they destroy eggs. Plus, they eat massive amounts of agricultural crops and the specific bugs that other birds rely on to survive. And in urban areas, it gets so much worse. When thousands of starlings swarm, their droppings create this disgusting mess that actively corrodes buildings and city structures, all while transmitting diseases like salmonella and E. coli.
So the crucial point is really the scale of this contrast. Think about it. It started with just 100 birds. Today, the population is estimated at somewhere between 200 and 300 million in the US alone. And the costs are massive. The agricultural industry loses over $1 billion every single year because these birds just devour grapes, apples, cherries, and strawberries. But it's not just money we're losing, it's human lives. In 1960, a swarm of roughly 15,000 starlings got sucked into an airplane's engines. The plane crashed, and 62 people tragically lost their lives. A totally catastrophic loss, all stemming from one man's desire to release a few birds in a city park.
Which brings us to Section 4, Snakeheads, the Terminator fish.
Let's introduce our final case study, taking place right in the waters of Maryland. Meet the snakehead fish, an aquatic invader that is so terrifying it sparked a literal Frankenfish monster movie panic back in 2004. They were bought as exotic pets, they grew way too big, and they were dumped into nearby waters, a story that should sound extremely familiar to us by now. But snakeheads are basically the Terminators of the fish world. They can walk on land, they can breathe air, they can survive out of water for days. While they mostly eat other fish and frogs, their ability to leave the water means they occasionally hunt small reptiles, rodents, and even birds. When a few adults and 1,000 eggs were spotted in Maryland's Crofton Pond in 2002, the authorities completely panicked. And that panic led to some totally frantic, desperate eradication tactics. They literally poisoned Crofton Pond, killed every single fish inside, and then dried the entire pond out just to stop the snakeheads. But by 2004, juveniles were found in the massive Potomac River. And you can't exactly drain an entire river, right? So authorities